Hey there, it's Max. In this video, we're going to talk about exercise 1 for overlapping chunks. For the first part of it, I'm going to remove my camera because it's covering up a section of the slide though. So in this exercise, there were 3 different chunks, first, second, and third, with the sizes hex 40, hex 100, hex 50 respectively. The goal of this exercise is there is a chunk, the chunk third has a string in it, and we want to use the chunk second to overlap with the chunk third in order to corrupt said string. So you can see what this looks like in the video here. So we're going to look at the code for this. At the very beginning, we have 3 allocations like we talked about. This has hex 40, hex 100, and hex 50 respectively. And then we're copying in the string Bill Gates. But the thing is, we all know who's superior. We all know Steve Jobs is superior to Bill Gates. So we have to, and you know this, you have to overwrite Steve Jobs with Bill Gates. Sorry. You have to overwrite Bill Gates with Steve Jobs because he's superior. So at this point, we're writing hex A0 bytes, which is going to be a buffer overflow into chunk first. This allows us to go into chunk second, which allows us to corrupt the information in it, in particular the size, which is what this technique is about. After that, we free the chunk second, which is going to put it into the bin depending on the size that we have. And then we're going to allocate a chunk of size hex 150 and then write to it. If this technique is done correctly, then this allocation for the chunk fourth will actually be this chunk second. Even though the chunk second is hex 100 to start with, we can make the program believe that's bigger than it actually is. In terms of actually doing this, we have some nice visuals here. We have chunk first, chunk second, chunk third. It explains the vulnerability and how we actually want to set this up. There's, I believe, 3 to-dos in this. The first to-do is the chunk size that we're going to overwrite. So this amount here of 50 is actually incorrect, so please ignore it. That's what you actually need to change. So that first thing is we need to get right in front of the size and corrupt the size. After that, we need to write the size itself. So when we write this size, we need to make sure it's a chunk that's going to be allocated. Because, again, if we don't, the chunk being allocated for fourth is hex 150. If the chunk size isn't the proper size, it won't get allocated because it's not going to get used. After that, we need to line up the amount of bytes to get to the string Bill Gates in the chunk third that's directly ahead of us. And of course, we can use Steve Jobs for that. So there it is. That is the challenge for this one. Again, we're using a buffer overflow in the chunk first to overwrite the size of the chunk second. And then when chunk second gets freed and reallocated, we want it to go over the top of the chunk third. So good luck on the exercise.